Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Healthy Home Show. And today I have with me Carly Harryman from RockerMumma. As you may or may not know, I don't have kids, so I'm kind of not really up on, healthy homes, particularly directed at kids. Obviously, the same healthy home strategies apply to adults and kids alike, but I think we really need to pay special attention to the kind of materials and the toxins and everything else that we're introducing kids to at a really young age. So that's why I'm really pleased to speak to Carly today, because that's her area of expertise. Hi, Carly.
Hi.
How are you? So if you wouldn't mind starting off, Carly, with just kind of introducing yourself a bit. As I said, your kind of area of expertise is around, healthy children's bedrooms particularly, but I understand that you're kind of expanding a little bit out from that at the moment. But yeah, I'd just love to know kind of what you're up to at the moment, what got you into what you're doing at the moment, because like us all, I think it was probably down to an illness within your family that kind of triggered that kind of interest basically and got you
Indeed.
started on the path. So yeah, start there. That'd be great.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. So my name is Carly, and a year ago I set up a company selling organic bedding, mostly for babies, but we are going to branch out into older children, because just because they are older doesn't mean to say they suffer any less with allergies. So our bedding is certified either GOTS or OEKO-TEX, and they are both labels that are globally recognised to have no pesticides, insecticides, formaldehyde, and thousands of other chemicals that most parents probably have never even heard of, to be quite honest. And the way that I got there was through sheer hell, to be honest with you. I've suffered with allergies since I was a little girl. I was an asthmatic child. Thankfully, I grew out of it, and allergic to pets from a very young age. And then that sort of morphed into, I'm no less allergic to animals still to this day, but then after having my appendix out, I was working on cruise ships in Italy, and I had appendicitis on the ship, and I was rushed into a hospital. I'm not going to try and pronounce the name of where it was, but it was close to Rome. And I woke up, and my dad had flown in from Tenerife, bless him, to be by my side. I was 22. And that's basically when my gut problems then started. I think it was because they didn't have keyhole over there in those days, whereas if I'd had them out here, it would have been through keyhole. So I was opened up, and from literally the moment I recovered from my appendix, I had one problem after the other. And I was lucky enough to be working for Royal Caribbean, so I had private healthcare. So I spent the next year in and out of hospitals in Miami trying to diagnose what my problem was, because I would bloat so big that at 22 I would look 8 or 9 months pregnant sometimes, and it was uncomfortable. And even after all that, being in and out of hospital, all they came up with was IBS. And I was pretty choked, to be honest with you. But I got used to it. I worked out what foods made me react. And actually, to be honest with you, even it was only 3 years ago that I worked out garlic and onion are my worst culprits. That was through seeing a dietitian. So since then, I have been much better at managing my health, much better. But prior to that, I would still blow up every couple of months if I'd eaten too much of certain things. And then I went on to have children. And yes, that was a delight. So we had Jarvis 17 years ago, and he, bless his cotton socks, he obviously had similar issues and had at the time they said it was colic, and they say it's where the digestive system isn't properly formed. But from the research I've done since, I actually think he had cow's milk protein allergy, but they weren't as aware of it in those days. So he spent the first 6 weeks of his life quiet as a mouse, and everyone used to say how wonderful he was. And then he got to 6 weeks, and he didn't stop crying till he was 5.5 months old, which is common. That's normal, and that's what they class as colic. But there's a whole umbrella of illnesses that come under the word colic. So subsequently, that, unfortunately, we are back together now, but that not only caused my partner and I to split up because we couldn't bear the stress any longer. I'm the eldest grandchild of 20 grandchildren, and I had never, ever witnessed a baby with colic. So I thought, this is just unfair. Like, there is something wrong with my baby. We did everything. We went to the cranial osteopath, to no avail. He just grew out of it.
Describe colic to me, sorry.
So colic is, the way the doctors diagnose it, is any baby under 5.5 months to 6 months old that cries between 3 and 5 hours a day or longer, and between 3 days and 7 days. And with Jarvis, it was more like 5 or 6 days a week. So we would literally hold him like this, screaming, and there was no consoling him. You couldn't put him in any position to stop him screaming for, if we were lucky, 3 hours, but quite often it was more like 5.5, 6 hours till he cried himself to sleep. And it was tough. It was really, really tough.
And in hindsight, do you think that was down to his milk protein allergy?
Yeah, I do now. Yeah, I think his body could not break down the protein, and he was lifting his legs. He was showing all the signs that he was in chronic pain, but there was nothing that we could do. We tried colic drops, which just basically were like a sugar, really sugary, it never sat well with me, putting those drops into his mouth 3 times a day. But they made zero difference. Like, literally everything was recommended to us made. The only thing, well, they say they grow out of it at 5.5 to 6 months, but they also come off milk at 5.5 to 6 months. They're weaned. So he went on to solid food at 6 months, and that's when all of our problems with regard to him stopped. So he was then back to being a healthy bonny boy.
Okay, that's super interesting, because I know that you kind of draw parallels between the fact that you have a history of allergies in your family.
Yes.
And I know that you've kind of have done a lot of kind of work, or I see in a lot of your content online, you're talking a lot about how, those kind of allergies can move down the generations.
Yeah, they can.
But obviously, I just want to, if you wouldn't mind kind of talking about that a little bit, that would be great. But also, I know that you've made the connection even further and said that, okay, you don't think it's just the milk protein that was an issue, but bedding and
So it wasn't really
environment.
until we had Jemima. So just quickly, just to finish that part of the story off, we split up. His dad then got ill from the stress. I had late postnatal depression, which didn't get diagnosed till he was 2, which was around about the time we split up. Tone went into hospital with ulcerated colitis, which is an autoimmune disease. So that was the first red flag I had with his dad, being allergic to anything. So there is I think the statistics are, if you have one parent who has allergies, you're 50% likely to have a child with allergies. When it's 2, it's 75%.
Okay.
So we had 3 kids, only 2 of them had allergies, so that works out about right, doesn't it? And Jarvis's were not as, believe it or not, nowhere near as intense as Jemima's. Jemima's allergic to much more. And then, touch wood, our 6-year-old seems to be okay. But Jemima was the one that really started me digging. So Jemima was born. She was a beautiful bonny weight of 8'6". She was our biggest baby. She was happy, smiley, came out singing. And then she was breastfed. They were all breastfed, but Jarvis not as long. She was breastfed, and every time she fed, she would projectile vomit, especially at night time, because they drink more, eat more at night time, so they're filling up for the night. And she was fed on demand, which was recommended in those days. That's even more exhausting for mums who feed on demand. So basically you sit down and you get your boob out whenever, as and when they want it, which is pretty much means you spend all day, every day on the settee. And she, especially at night time, it was like sick all day, a little bit of sick. And then we'd put her down to bed, and where she'd fed so much, she would just projectile vomit all over us. And then you'd lay her down and you'd be changing her cot and put her in another bed, and before you've changed the cot, she'd projectile vomit all over our bed. And so it went on and it went on for it felt like years, but it was months. And I finally started keeping a diary because I know that I'm allergic to food. So I assumed there's something that I'm eating that's causing her to projectile vomit. And within a week, I'd worked out if I ate dairy, she was sick.
Amazing.
So I went to the doctor. Even 10 years ago, the doctor said, no, I need to see more of an extensive diet plan than that to say that she's allergic to dairy. And I stood up on his desk, and because of my postnatal depression, I had a very good relationship with him, and I put my hands on his desk and I said, I am telling you now, my child is allergic to dairy. Said, okay. Then we need to put her on special milk. So I came away absolutely elated, thinking this is the end of my problems. It stopped her from projectile vomiting, but that's it. Every time I'd put her down at night time, she was still coughing. She had a constant night cough. So we're now into summer because she's a January baby. So all the winter colds have gone, and she was still constantly congested at night time. But the funny connection that I made, and I don't know how long it took me to make the connection, is when we'd been out for a walk during the day, she come home and has her nap downstairs in her pushchair or her pram. She doesn't cough. She's not even congested. Then as soon as nighttime comes, she won't settle. Even if she does fall asleep, she's constantly waking herself up coughing. So I then started to think, what is in her bedroom that isn't in the lounge? And that's when I discovered that there is so much we don't know that goes into a cotton sheet. And I've pretty much been on a discovery lesson ever since. Even recently, since I've started the business, I have discovered that, which I didn't know before, that there's something called the atopic march, which basically means that if you suffer from an allergy, i.e. cow's milk protein allergy, then you are a lot more likely to be sensitive to chemicals and clothing and things that anything in the environment, toxins basically. So it's been a real awakening for me, and I would just like to do anything I can to help new parents navigate this, to try to prevent any of those scenarios happening to anyone else, basically, because it was a tough few years for us as a couple, as a family.
Yeah,
It really
bless
was.
you. I bet. And what an amazing mission to have,
Thank
because
you.
it's just, it horrifies me when I look into, child's nurseries and basically the way people are kind of like painting using toxic paint. And then, you see that, well, I've read that there are quite a lot of few connections between cot deaths, unfortunately, and even the kind of plasticated mattresses, basically,
Yeah.
that some parents are using it, but no one's being told about this. No,
No.
this never kind of seems to be highlighted. So
That's being very much hidden, I think, without sounding like a conspiracy theorist. I was on my business course with a company called the Mold Lab, and they have tests for people to see if the reason why their 9 children in one house are ill is due to the mold. And the man who owns the company said to me on the day when we were talking about our businesses, he said, SIDS, which is the new name for cot death, the statistics say that it's pretty much always the second or third child. And what do you reuse more than anything is a cot mattress.
wow, that's
That's
super
wear and tear
interesting.
on the mattress. Yeah. So as the plastic deteriorates, I guess.
Yeah, that's super interesting because in a lot of the work that I do around furnishings within homes in general, we sort of say to people that if you're going to buy anything new, and it's got formaldehyde or whatever in the glues or anything else, or you're using fire retardants on the sofa or the textiles or whatever, then you should leave it, if possible, in another room or somewhere else for 6 months, basically to off gas,
Yeah,
if
well,
that's at all
it's a
possible.
known carcinogen. So how did it ever pass that this chemical can be put in a baby's cot sheet?
I
It's
know it's bizarre,
beyond
but it's
me.
interesting that you're talking about the fact that it could get worse once the mattress breaks down, because it was always my understanding that once these kind of like gases,
Well, mattresses have a plastic in them, don't they? So I think maybe formaldehyde, not so much. That's more of an off-gasser. But there's a plastic in foam mattresses. But it stops the. Quite often they're water resistant. So if the baby pees, it doesn't ruin the foam underneath. And I think it's there that the problem lies. Personally, it's in that plastic backing or
yeah, yeah.
waterproof material that they use.
Sure, and I guess you can't help, you can't monitor whether they were licking it or,
God, no.
it's just kind of impossible to kind of control that, isn't it?
I suppose if it's um, disintegrating, they could inhale it as well, potentially, can't they? I mean, we don't know. All I do know is that a baby's skin is 30% more permeable than an adult. So, whatever effect it would have on us, it would be a lot worse for a little one, obviously, lungs and skin. It doesn't matter which way they're ingesting it, does it?
Well, absolutely, because when I speak to kind of a lot of air quality experts, that's a good point that they make. It's like, basically compared to the size of an adult, obviously a baby is much, much smaller, and their kind of lungs in comparison are kind of bigger, if you see what I mean, to the size of
Yeah.
their body. So they're kind of absorbing all this whatever pollution is in the air and plastics are in the air, basically in tiny particles, like directly into their lungs before really their kind of immune system or any other kind of like systems have had a real chance to develop. So obviously it's affecting their kind of their development and their kind of neural pathways and their growth much, much more. But yeah, I'm fascinated to know then. So basically when you had your second child and you took the leap further, that it was kind of not just about the kind of milk protein that they were allergic to, but they were kind of still being ill because of the cot and the mattress and everything else. What did you change first, and how kind of like how much more of the kind of bedroom did you look at, and did you come across any other kind of culprits?
Yeah, that could have been, at that time of your life when you've got a relatively young child, young baby, stripping the whole bedroom back would have freaked me out. But we'd moved into our new home, which was a new build. Now I've since learned that there can still be toxins in new builds. But at the time, 10 years ago, I felt quite comfortable that everything was new in the actual building. So we'd start closest to her. So whatever's affecting her, we'll start with her clothing. So we went organic or bamboo rompers. And, even though when she was being sick all the time, we were rattling through rompers. By the time they're 6 months old, they only need, 2 or 3 changes of clothes a day. It's not like I wasn't so much worried about the quantity as the quality or whether it would get dirty. So they're just plain white. And then further from that, because she was still congested, I feel the night cough started to dwindle as the summer progressed. But it was the congestion. She sounded like Darth Vader all the time as a baby at night time. The moment you laid her on her back, and we tried, lying her at an angle, propping the cot up, which they recommend you shouldn't do, all these illegal things. But she was breastfed, so would often co-sleep with us. And in fact, although all sheets can have these chemicals in, we found she wasn't nearly as bad in our bed as she was in her cot, which, you feel like you're throwing your baby to the wolves when they start getting ill from being in their own bed. So, yeah, then we went to the cot sheets, all organic cot sheets, and thankfully that was it. She improved massively from the cot sheets.
Oh, fantastic. That's amazing. Yeah, we don't realize, it's a good point that you make about the clothing as well, because obviously it's coming to light so much at the moment about kind of plastics in our clothes and how they're really affecting our hormones,
Yeah.
and leading to all kinds of like issues in adults, like fertility issues, etc. But yeah, if you're clothing a baby in so much plastic and basically artificial clothing, then of course that's going to get absorbed straight into their skin, poor things, and they've not really developed their immune system or system yet to get rid of that.
Yeah, one of the things that really, really pains me and I still can't get my head round is the stay press which is formaldehyde, basically. The stuff they put in to make your shirts and school uniform easy iron or non-crease, which they also use in bed sheets to stop you having to iron them, is a huge toxin. That is lethal, absolutely lethal. And when they're brand new and people don't wash them, obviously, like you say, you need time for them to be washed and left well away from a child wearing them, for them to get rid of all that toxins they hold in. And the same for pesticides and insecticides, if we're talking,
Yeah, I find it mad that we were talking earlier basically about the fact that it was only this year, 2025 in February, that they have started to ban formaldehyde in children's clothing.
I think it's in textiles now, as of
Okay,
February.
in textiles, right? Yeah, because it's mad because I see there's so much campaigning going on in my world at the moment around fire retardant chemicals basically and
Yeah,
the harm that they cause and the fact that they still have legislation around this that you have to put it on a sofa. But I mean, fortunately, they've done away with the fact that you have to put it on a mattress now, on adult mattress or child mattress, because that was just mad that happened before. But as you say, it doesn't matter too much whether they've changed the law now because there's still going to be stuff in kind of circulation for years and
oh,
years and
for
years to
years.
come.
Yeah, decades. Absolutely decades. You think how much stock big stores buy, and how
Yeah.
often it's been, how long it will be sitting in stock or in a warehouse. I won't name any big organisations, but it will be years, and then that's only this country. What about stuff that's imported?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think we just can't be too casual about the fact that even though the government seems to be doing something on this front, which is going in the right direction, in my mind, it's not really enough.
No, yeah.
I think recently this year, France came out and said that they were going to ban forever chemicals, which is the chemicals that basically make things not wrinkle, they smooth things out, and we're finding out how that is so destructive not only to our environment and nature, etc., but also to our own health. So fortunately, they've brought in a kind of like ban that's going to be effective from next year. But there was still kind of things that were exempt from that. That was non-stick cookware, for example, which I just think I don't even understand how they managed it to not exempt
No,
that.
no,
But point being that really you have to do your own homework and you have to basically kind of be really mindful about what you're using in your bedding and anywhere in the household, because you can't rely that the government is doing the kind of job for you and basically kind of not allowing these toxic products to come into our homes. But one thing else I wanted to ask you, yeah, tell me a little bit more about kind of how you're developing the business. And so what would you recommend first of all, on the bedding front that people go for to make sure that they're kind of making at least the sleeping environment of their kids and their babies basically as healthy as possible? And then do you have any tips outside of that of what we should be looking at as well?
Okay, well, it's funny you should mention France, actually, because most of my GOTS tested products are from a company called Moulin Roty, which is obviously a French-based Parisian company. And they seem to be the leaders in toxins as far as baby bedding is concerned. Everything is either GOTS or Ocutex from them, and not just the sheets, the cot bumpers, the baby grow bags, which for those of you that don't have children, kids have got a habit of kicking their feet when they're sleeping, so they throw covers off. So we tend to nowadays buy either summer or winter sort of sleeping bags that put on and zip up and do them up with poppers so that they can't kick their covers off. And I think that for me, they were an absolute dream when I discovered them, because they stay asleep then, because they don't get cold as well, because they're not coughing or mucousy or blah, blah, blah. But first of all, I would start with, so we're in the summer, we're heading towards summer now. It would just be a vest that is organic cotton with one of the baby grows over, baby sleep bags or grow bags they're called. They tend to be called grow bags in this country. But again, a nice thin one because it's summer, so they're togged just like a duvet. So you'd get a thin cotton one for the summer and then maybe a 1 to 2.5 tog for the winter. no covers, and then the sheet that they lay on, or nowadays we tend to just put a sheet on, and for the top half where the head is, because of sickness or dribble or whatever, you put a muzzy over it, and then you can change the muzzy and wash it more easily, because they're muslin, obviously, and they dry quicker, and they're smaller, so we can turn them around quicker. So I tended to just keep a sheet on and always just put a muzzy over the top half where the head is, and just change that more regularly. So always, yes, start with whatever's touching the baby first. And I think what drew me to that conclusion was probably that Jemima was one of those kids that could never stand labels, even as a tot, when she could barely reach things. She was always scratching wherever the label was. And straight away that made me think, she's just like me, basically. Allergic to everything. Everything irritates her. And as for tips, just do, obviously, I think nowadays we need to be financially aware, because these things do cost more money, but we also live in a world where we live in a world of excess. So everyone buys you stuff. Perhaps you don't need as much, but what you do have is of better quality. Kids do not need 30 baby grows in the first 3 months of their life. So, have those conversations with people. I know it's difficult and people are buying you gifts and baby presents, but with the first child, you often get bought the same thing 30 times. And, if it's not organic, I really struggled with that with Jemima. I didn't want people to waste their money on stuff that she can't wear. And we still have it now. She gets bath bombs bought for her all the time. She cannot put them in the bath. We have to give them away, because I can't even let her sister have them, because that's unfair.
Yeah.
So start closest to baby would be my advice, and just look for the labels. You're looking for GOTS or Ocutext on anything to do with baby. And equally, if you're not sure that your baby is going, so obviously some babies are more sensitive than others, then if you or your partner have allergies, then there's a much higher chance that your baby or child will develop allergies. So you've got a 50% chance if it's one of you, and a 75% chance if both parents have food allergies or asthma, eczema, hay fever.
Okay. They're interesting statistics actually to know. I just wondered, how important do you think it is to spend more money on the mattress itself?
The mattress is, even government guidelines that's the one thing they say that you mustn't reuse. And I think it is due to SIDS that they say, with every child, if you don't buy anything else, you buy a mattress. They don't have to be expensive. They just need to be new. I would, as you would probably recommend, you can now get plastic-free ones. So, yeah.
Is there any kind of company that you recommend to go to for that, or?
Not for mattress. Actually, I don't stock mattresses, but you will get the GOTS, either GOTS or Ocutex, or there's another one more for furniture and bigger items that's green label, and that means that the paint's toxin-free that they've used on the cot. The mattress is completely eco-friendly, and
Yeah, I've actually kind of interviewed a really great lady called Rebecca Willis on the podcast before, who has a company called Cotton Safe Natural Mattress, and I'm pretty sure they do children's cot mattresses as well as adults organic mattresses. So yeah, they're an interesting kind of company to check out. What are your thoughts around baby monitors? Because I did a bit of a deep dive into baby monitors for somebody once, and basically I was really concerned at the levels of EMF radiation that were given off by these baby monitors. And obviously, normally people put them right next to baby's head, so it's kind of missing on this kind of radiation. And then, yeah, it doesn't sound like a good idea to me. So I just wondered if you kind of explored that at all.
I haven't explored it. There are a lot being sold on TikTok and things like that. I would avoid buying one from, if it isn't from a real company. I didn't use them for my last two. I didn't feel the need to. Mine were breastfed. I think that makes a difference because they're with you as they're falling asleep, quite often co-sleeping. I would, probably encourage people to start avoiding them. You certainly don't need one with a video to see your baby, unless you live in a huge house where you really can't see them or hear them. But they don't. That doesn't sit comfortably with me. Likewise, listening to stories on the mobile phone when they're going to bed. No, you cannot beat good old-fashioned books.
Yeah, I totally agree. Actually, I was in a lecture the other day in London with this that was given by this author who wrote, what's his name? His name Jonathan Haidt, I think. I've probably mullered the way that I pronounce that, but he wrote a book called How to Free the Anxious Generation, and it was super interesting because he was looking at basically, the turning points of how kind of our younger generations are now becoming so anxious because as a result of the introduction of mobile phones, basically.
Yeah.
And with that, the lack of ability to kind of make proper social connections, etc. But I mean, yeah, that's a super interesting point. I think kind of, staying off the technology as much as possible and going back to kind of bedtime stories. And everyone loves a story anyway. I mean,
Children, it doesn't matter what age they are. I'm guessing my son won't be listening to your podcast, but he was 17 yesterday, and he comes in the bedroom, and it annoys me because I just want the little one to settle, and quite often he riles her up. But he comes in whilst I'm reading her a story, and I know it is just because it reminds him of when he was read a bedtime story. And he won't leave until either she sleeps or I finish the story, depending on whether I kick him out usually, because he's
that's
talking.
super cute.
I know.
Just a couple of things, sorry, to go back to that I wanted to ask you before I let you go.
Sure.
Basically, looking at the kind of nursery then as a whole, is there anything else that you would recommend people do? I mean, I try and encourage people to obviously use non-toxic paints because, if you're, as you mentioned kind of earlier, I think there's only kind of a couple of times that you go all out and do a bit of redecorating in your home. It's generally after you've kind of just bought your home and you moved in, or it's generally after kind of you've just had a new baby and so everyone gets really excited about redecorating the nursery. But then I worry at that point, everyone else seems to be using kind of like toxic paint, not paying attention to kind of the walls and actually the effect that has on the air quality and on child's growth and everything else. But so apart from maybe the paints, is there anything else that we should be kind of looking out for in the nursery?
Yeah, wallpapers can be quite toxic, can't they? And even wallpaper adhesive. Wallpaper adhesive is brutal. If you can, Etsy is amazing because I've just redecorated the girls' bedroom. I've actually done it like a nursery to photograph my products and put them on my socials. So I used both low tox adhesive and wallpaper that I bought from Etsy.
Okay.
But quite a lot of there are some big companies, Little Green and Morris & Co. They have very low toxicity in their products, don't they? So if you want to go for a statement wall or something that with a pattern that we're all familiar with that's trending, like some of these big ones, then I think they're two that I discovered anyway. I'm half thinking I would really like to put together like a guide for new parents of safe everything you need in the nursery: paints, wallpapers, adhesives, because people don't think, they just don't imagine for one moment there'd be carcinogens in their wallpaper paste, I don't think. But there are. And if you're going to do it anywhere in your house, then you have to start with the baby's room, surely, the baby's nursery.
Absolutely. And I think, it makes such a difference, basically, having good air quality, for example, because we can see how much of a difference that makes in adults, basically. So in children and babies and when they're in their kind of developing years, it's obviously super important that they're kind of the air that they're breathing in the entire time is as pure as possible. There's actually, I haven't worked with them, but there's some cute little sort of air monitors that you can get these days. I think one's called Birdie Design or something like that, and I'd really like the opportunity to use it myself because I just think it looks super cute. And it's basically like it's the shape of a bird basically. You put it on the wall, and when the air quality is bad in the room, it sort of like starts to keel over.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
I'd
I
love
mean,
that.
it's just a kind of fun way to kind of get an air monitor into a room that's not, kind of boring looking, and presumably the kids kind of like the look of it as well. But yeah, I'd like the opportunity to kind of use that in somewhere that I'm designing or whatever, because I think that's a really good piece of kit, and all you really have to do then is just, ventilate a bit more and open the windows or whatever. But I think it's just it's a good tool to use to kind of like act as a bit of a reminder. But yeah, so really, I kind of just wanted to. I mean, we touched earlier before the call actually on. I asked you whether you saw Panorama last night. Not last night, sorry, the other night. Because this week there was a really interesting episode on baby food. And I was totally unaware, not being a mother, that basically so many women these days obviously used baby food pouches basically to feed their kids. And they had a real expose on how they're really not very healthy, and
I
they've
can't
got far
believe.
too much sugar. So I just wondered if you saw that, and if you had any thoughts basically around things like baby food, because as we know, or as you know, basically from the kind of bedding industry, there's so many kind of pesticides and toxins and even kind of sugars and everything else in kind of food and babies' products that we're not informed about for
No,
sure.
that really surprised me because the reason why mums, I think I can speak for other working mums in that we're using pouches because our life is so fast paced. Basically, we don't get to raise our children for very long nowadays. I was really fortunate with Jemima that she got me at home until, because then we had Mila. But Mila, I've gone. Well, I got a few years with her, but yeah, I was back at work within 9 months of having my third. So it's about loading that bag for other people, for their caregivers, and you just do what you have to do. And when you read organic or, it's full of fruit, you assume, now we know wrongly, that they are healthy. But the fact that they've got 5 times the amount of sugar in of their daily allowance is criminal. I mean, it makes it more poignant that we really need to take hold of our own health in every way. We all know that we need to, push to get a doctor's appointment or whatever, but your family's health goes far further than just getting yourself checked out from the doctors every 5 years, or taking your children to the doctor when there's something wrong. We need to be more responsible for everything that they consume, I think, and we need to educate the world that we can't rely on. You can't even rely on what's on the back if you do read them. I read labels on food all the time because I'm so intolerant of so much. But obviously, if they're eating foods that don't quite agree with them, then that's going to make them less resilient to. I'm speaking more for children with sensitivities, less resilient to other stuff. Their immune system's their immune system, and it will start to attack. All these extra toxins attack their immunity. So for
Yeah.
me, it's all about, we eat organics as best we can. We buy meat from the butchers where we can and as much as we can. It's just trying to eliminate all those hormones, basically, for us and as well as what I'm allergic to in our foods, which, yourself, when you're working, that's a job in itself. Like, our food shopping takes a huge amount of my time every week. Because you can't get it all in the supermarkets, and now I'm starting to wonder if you can actually rely on what's written on the back of the packets, to be quite honest.
Well, it's a completely valid point. I mean, that's what makes me so angry, because, you would hope that there are some guidelines or some legislation in place basically that would mean that the companies like this couldn't take advantage and basically missell products that were meant to be healthy to babies. I mean, that just kind of pisses me off so much that they would even want to do that, let alone get away with it. Do you know what I mean? And as you say, everyone's so busy these days, but also everyone has trust that, these companies are doing things
Doing what they're
correctly. So it
supposed
makes
to
you,
be doing, yeah.
and it's just, there doesn't ever seem to be an accountability, which kind of makes me so angry. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, for anyone who's interested, I would really recommend watching that Panorama episode, because it was highlighting the fact that in a lot of these baby food pouches, there was literally twice, if not three times, the amount of sugar in each portion that a child should have. In fact, they were promoting it to basically 4-month-old babies, and in fact, the doctors say that actually that's not true at all. It's actually that those amounts that they kind of like recommend is based on a 1-year-old, not even a 4-month-old. And so doctors were saying, that these 2-year-old kids were coming in with obesity and losing teeth because of the amount of sugar that was in these pouches, and getting
We wonder why.
diabetes. I mean, it's
And we wonder
mad.
why. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Well, now we know.
Yeah. We can't
um
get dentists either to fix their teeth.
I mean, just it's
It's a
super
crazy world.
alarming.
It is a crazy world we're living in at the moment, but we do need to take a little bit more consideration, I think, and maybe a little less trust in what we're putting in our own children's mouths. Like I say, I assess pretty much everything because we've all. And the annoying thing for me is I can read the back of the packets, and the allergens that are bold, what we're allergic to, because minor intolerances aren't actually allergens. So I actually do have to read all the small print, and I'm 46, so it's getting a bit like this now. But, Jarvis was allergic to tomatoes, but he would come up in hives. It's not an allergen, but to him, it was. Obviously, Jemima milk and loads of other stuff, onions and garlic. So I have to read the back. So what I tend to do is I just do the weekly shop and buy the same stuff all the time, which also gets very monotonous and quite boring. And I do get moans from the kids, but we eat quite a basic diet. But my journey has led me to that. I don't suggest for one moment everyone has to rush out and start buying organic food, because it is, more expensive. And when you've got a family of 5 like we have, it's almost unaffordable to shop like that all the time. But you have to we certainly, we don't go anywhere luxurious on holiday, for example. We make sacrifices to have organic meat and veg.
Yeah. I mean, I do too. But I must admit, I don't know. Lots of people always say to me, oh, it's really expensive organic. And what pisses me off is we shouldn't have to pay more
No.
for food that's in its
Food.
proper form. Do you know what I mean? That's in proper food. But at the same time, I do feel that it's probably the most important thing that we spend our money on. Because the problem is, okay, it might be a little bit more expensive, but to be honest, not eating organic food in a way is going to be more costly down the line in the kind of medical bills and everything else that you kind of need, and maybe increased supplements and everything else that you need to basically compensate for the fact that you're not getting real food. So, I mean,
Yeah, indeed.
I mean,
I
that's,
speak from both sides because I have a 16-year-old that could eat 4 apples in one go. So we buy 30 apples a week, and that's just for their
ouch.
lunches. Yeah. So
Okay, if I had
it's
children, I might
harsh.
change my mind around the organic food.
When you got 3 kids, especially when one of them eats like an adult now. I mean, I don't actually know how people manage with like 3 teenage boys in the house, for example.
Yeah,
You'd need another mortgage. You'd need no mortgage.
crazy. Anyway, listen, Carly, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And it's been really nice to
Thank
talk
you.
to you because, as I said to you earlier, it's like I don't have children. So, as much as I know how things in our environment and our home have a worse effect actually on children than they do on adults, it's just really nice to hear the work that you're doing and your expertise around that in particular. And thank you for kind of like, increasing the awareness around this, because I think it's really, really important. Children are getting more ill than ever, and people are getting more allergies than ever. So I think it's really important that we do everything that we can. So thank you for the
Thank
work that you do, and just tell us, like, where can we find you on any of the socials or website, etc.
So my website is www.rockermumma.com, and that's pretty much my handles. On my Insta is rocker_mumma, and TikTok RockerMumma. So
Wow.
thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, me too. And I'll put links to all your everywhere we can find you basically in the show notes. And yeah, I look forward to following your work further. Thank you.
Thank you. Take good care.